And so it is. Welcome to React State, passing functions around, fucking up state, all that kind of stuff. By the end of this lesson, I hope that every single one of you will be able to manipulate state. Was everybody in the first lesson this morning? Greg, were you in the lesson this morning?
Negative. I was in the doctor's office.
Okay, that's cool. So what we're going to do is same thing as yesterday. I'm going to give you some HTML, and we're going to try to reactify this. So go ahead and get your Create React app started now. This is going to take a second.
What's the theme?
We'll do cats again. All right, so if somebody were to give you the following HTML, I'm going to put it in the Slack channel, in the thread next to my video link. All right, so there's the HTML. Try to turn this into a React app. If all you can do is just return the relevant stuff out of like the basic function, that's okay. If you can get it happening with individual cat components, so much the better. But give it a shot, do your best. I'm going to put 6 minutes on the clock. Go. Another minute.
Good old Brighton internet.
All right, slack me your code. Hit me with your best code. Why don't you hit me with your best code? Hit me with your best code. Coding away. Slack me what you got. There they come. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Greg. Very well done, Bob. Adrian, I think you're finding the beat. Let's see. Thank you, Mr. Holly. Let's see. Lynn and I see Carlos on here. No, just Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. Very nice. All right. Let's take a look at this. All right, this should be finishing up right about now. There we go. All right, so if I fire up a server here, remember to run your code in a create React app, npm start. That's like your Rails S.
What's the big difference between npm and yarn start? Anything?
Nothing. They're the exact same thing. So the backstory there is that, so I think I said this in another lesson. NPM isn't like some community tool or something. It's a corporation, and they do a variety of different things. But the community felt like they were moving a little bit slowly on some much needed upgrades to the NPM ecosystem and that NPM command line tool in particular. So there is an effort led by Yehuda Katz, who's an ex-Rails guy. He was responsible for the Rust programming language. He created Ember. He's like my patron programming saint. He led an effort to create an alternative to NPM called Yarn that was going to fix all the problems that everybody had with NPM. And it was awesome. And then like a week later, NPM was like, mercy, mercy, mercy. Here you go. Here's lock files. Here's here's deterministic like dependency management. There's all these things that Yarn was supposed to do got rolled into NPM. And so it's hard to notice a huge difference between the two now. But NPM is like kind of stalled out again. So I started noticing Yarn getting increasingly popular. And some of that's just people fucking hate NPM. And some of it is that Yarn is legitimately better. But at this point, I would say it's incrementally better. So if all you use right now is NPM, like, you're not in bad shape. If you want to experiment with Yarn, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world either. Yeah, NPM start and Yarn start are the exact same thing. Cool. So if I fire up this app.js file, get rid of that logo, get rid of all this boilerplate. I'm going to borrow this code from Lynn.
Kyle, my volume is all the way up, and you still are sounding really soft to me. Is anybody else having issues with that? No? Okay.
Good to me.
It sounds really quiet, and I definitely have my volume all the way up.
That's probably adjustable. Let me take a look. Oh yeah, that's pretty low. Am I like bowing anybody out right now? Okay, Haley said down. How about now, Haley? Okay?
That's reasonable.
Cool. All right. Lynn, are you doing better? All right. Apologies to anybody's ears that I just annihilated. Okay, just about everybody got at least this far. So a couple things. Let's say I want to make individual components out of each of these LIs. Lynn, give me a first step that I can follow. Oh, unmute.
So you probably want to start by turning the function into a class.
Ooh, do I? Why would I turn it into a class?
I'm sorry, that's for state, not for components.
Right.
So what you want to do is some JSX and
Okay.
create a cat file. So you'll have something to import.
Yeah, I like that. So I'm going to make a cat file. Follow along with this part if you didn't get this far in the first part. I'm going to make a new file in the source folder called cat.js, capital C. Okay, very nice. Mr. Hawley, please give me one more step that I can do.
Import your cat file.
Love it. Import cat from, what's the syntax?
Well, I don't know where you put it, but /cat.
Yep, perfect. All right, so that imports that cat file that I made. Haley, what should I do next?
So let's go into your cat file and make a function for cat. Oh, and import React too.
Cool. Bob, give me another step I can do.
So in front of your function, put export default function, and then props in the yep, right there.
Cool, very nice. Adrian, give me another step.
Inside your function, you can return a list item. And inside that list item, you will throw in those curly brackets with props.name.
You're beautiful. Cool. So this looks like a pretty good component to me. Let's see, Greg, can you give me a guess at what I need to do to use this component now?
Import it on the top.
So it's
Oh, you already
imported.
did that.
Yep.
So we're gonna just replace the 3 LIs with just your cat component.
Good. And then how do I get the name in?
You just hard code it in at this point. Name equals
Yeah. How do I hard code it in?
name equals fangs.
Cool. So I can make a couple of buddies here. Oops. Gotta close those. There we go. All right, so if I did this right, hey, there's my guys. Questions about anything that we just did?
Did you do anything to your CSS?
Nope, nothing.
You getting that weird dot issue as well, Lynn?
Yeah, my dots are way over to the left of the screen, whereas Kyle's are clustered right by the cat names.
I get the
So
same
those-
thing.
Those come from this right here. So you might check inside your app.css file. We're not going to use any of this. You can delete it if you want. There's also an index.css file. You can delete that too. We don't need any of it. So then it'll just look like this. Cool. Other questions about anything that we've done? All right. If you need help, let's see. This nice. If you need help catching up with this, I'm going to throw this in that same thread. So the app.js file should look like this. And your cat.js file should look like that. Cool, code's there if you need it. Next thing, I want to move these cats into state. So I want you to give that a shot on your own. Let's take 2 minutes for that. See if you can get all of these cat names in state, in app.js' state. Go.
And you did say in app.js, yeah?
Correct.
Do you want us to Slack you?
When you got it, absolutely. All right, pencils down. Select me what you got. Outstanding work, Lynn. Very nice, Haley. Good job, Adrian. Great work, Bob. Good job, Greg. Good job, Andrew.
All right.
All right, let's talk about it. So first thing I need to do is turn this into a class. I can do that by changing function to class, getting rid of the parentheses, extending the correct class, wrapping that in a render method. So that is just general function component to class component stuff. You should be able to go back and forth between those just like that. We haven't changed any of the behavior of the app. Still works exactly the same. It's just a class component now. So if you've been following the labs, we have this like constructor and we do this dot state equals whatever the fuck. This is not a great way to do this. You used to have to do it this way. We do not have to do it this way anymore. If you don't use a constructor function, again, for the rest of your like Flatiron career, you'll be just fine. We can just do state equals and put it in there. So we're gonna put it in as cats.
Do you think we'll still see something like that in production code?
Yeah, it's possible, but becomes a little bit less likely every month. Cool. So I want to underscore this again. This is not const state equals. It's not a function body. We can't just put random JavaScript statements in there. There's only a couple of things that we can do. It's also not the body of an object. And so we don't put like commas and stuff after that. It's a completely separate thing. So this is just like a single at symbol state was in Ruby. Same kind of idea. All right. Now, if I want to use this state, then instead of assigning this to a string, I'm going to assign it to something like this.state.cats0.name. Like that. Fangs, whiskers, bud. Fangs, whiskers, bud. Questions about that? Please take a second to make your screen look like mine, if you need to. Cool. So next step, I want us to be able to iterate through this state. Now, I know some of you have done this already. Be real careful about things like that. That'll work once. It won't be reactive though. That's why I'd recommend you do those things inside the render. But another 2 minutes. See if you can iterate through the cats in state and get them to show up that way. Go. 2 minutes. Give it your best shot. All right, pencils down. Please Slack me your code. These get better every time. Makes me happy.
I'm not gonna lie, I adjusted my blinds and I didn't know what the hell we were doing there.
We're trying to iterate through the cats in state and get them to show up on the page. Thank you, Haley. Slack me up your best code. Thank you, Mr. Holly. Very nice. Oh, Bob, you were so close. You're missing one word. Well done, Lynn. You just got to use it now. You did the iteration right. Hey, there it is, Bob.
I was just like, man, why isn't this returning what I wanted to? I wonder.
So we're going to store it in a variable here. Now, notice that this is in a function body. So we do have to have like a scope declaration on this. You can probably, it might even work if you do this, but my guess is it gets kicked back by Webpack. You're gonna have to map through the cats, and you want to turn each cat into a JSX element. So we're going to transform an array of 3 cats into an array of 3 components. So we'll return, take one of these. Something like that. And then saying, hey man, you're not using cats. So I get rid of these. And there they are. I'm going to make this a Polly Shore. Polly Shore cat. And there it is. Still works.
Now, if that's a Polly Shore cat, is it pronounced Buddy or is it Buddy?
It's Buddy. Cool. Questions about what we just did? Cool. Make sure your screen looks like mine. Cool. So we got some hungry cats. So we're going to keep track in the cat.js file of whether or not these cats have been fed. The first thing we need to do is keep track of state. And what does state mean?
It's a class.
It's a class. Every time we want to add state to something, we got to turn it into a class. So we do this thing that we've gotten so fast at. We turn it into a class. Cool. Ooh, here's an interesting thing. Why do I have a red X on that line?
You need to have this dot props dot name.
It's
Because
this
it's
dot
faster.
props. Yeah. So in the functional components, it's like an argument. We pass it into the function. In a class component, we still have props. It still works the exact same way, except we access it with this dot props. Cool. So we want to keep track of whether or not a cat is fed. So what I want you to do is add the state for that to your cat component. I'll give you a minute for that one and then Slack it to me. Go.
Can you repeat that?
I would like you to add an isFed property to state for this cat component. Keep track of whether or not a cat is fed. Add it and Slack it. Slack me this component. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Holly. Very nice, Adrian. Good job, Bob.
Does anybody else's linter do really funky things with JSX?
Yeah, you almost definitely need to install a separate linter for React because like none of this is valid JavaScript. Like that isn't valid JavaScript, so it needs a special linter for it.
It's working just fine until we hit React.
Oh yeah, so yeah, JSX is like its own animal. All right, very nice, Lynn. So we add state up here. Always an object. Cool. These cats haven't been fed. I don't want to get too sidetracked with the Boolean logic thing again. We're going to add something like this to the template, and then inside these handlebars, we'll say something like this.state.isFed. So we're testing to see whether or not that's true. And if it's not true, then we want it to print the string not with a space. So each of these lines should say something like, Whiskers has not been fed. Hey, none of these cats have been fed. Why do I have to do that Boolean logic?
Because you have to bind it if you're trying to write a traditional function or something. So you have to use a ternary.
Ooh, almost.
Your value is Boolean instead of a string.
Yep. Well, why can't I just do an if statement?
You can't use
And
if statements in JSX.
Cannot use if statements in JSX. Can't use statements, period. Can only use expressions. Or is an expression. If is a statement. Because normally, what this really is it's basically that, right? In fact, we could even do something like
Kyle, I'm sending you Slacks. I don't think they're going through though.
uh-oh.
Right in the internet.
Oh, I just got one. I see it. I see your is fed. Good job. Got it, Greg. All right. So I could do something like this and then make all of this like, I could do it that way. That looks pretty fucking ugly. So to avoid having to do something like that, we can do that little Boolean logic. Cool. So now we want to be able to change this state. Follow along with me. I want you to add a button like so. And the button is going to say feed. So in our HTML, we should have that, a little button that says feed. And what we want to happen is when we click on the button, it updates that state from false to true. Someone who was in the first round of this morning, do you remember what we do to do like click event listeners?
On click?
On click. So there is no there's no add event listener. I'm going to say this a bunch of times again. You cannot work with the DOM and React. You cannot work with the DOM and React. The DOM totally off limits in React. We can't use document.querySelector. We can't do add event listener on elements. We can't do any of that shit. React is like a little shell on top of the DOM, and all we ever interact with is React, and React does all the DOM stuff for us. So since we can't do add event listener, we have to use things like onClick. OnClick is looking for a function definition. So we could do something like this.handleClick, and then make a method over here called handleClick that takes in the event. Now, events are part of the DOM, so this isn't even a real event. It's called a synthetic event. But once we have that, it's exactly like all the shit you did in Mod 3. If this was a form, we could do event.preventDefault. There's event.target. There's like all that kind of shit. Except don't use event.target because that's I don't know. I guess you could because it's a synthetic event. I can't think of a good reason to though. Cool. So this is going to happen every time we click on that button. Even if we just console log the event. Auga, auga, auga. I didn't put the key when I was iterating. So remember, this key needs to be unique. But otherwise, that's how you get that to go away. Also, one of the fastest ways you can piss off an instructor is go like, I have a problem with my React app. When we throw up your console log, there's 400 problems with it. Make sure you get those error messages to go away. It's trying to help you. All right, if I click on one of these, all right, logs the event. Cool. What we want it to do is call setState on this. You cannot do this.state.isFed equals true. That's going to be your natural reaction. That's just like regular JavaScript, right? Against the rules, don't do it. What do we have to do instead?
This dot set state, and then
what?
and then put isFed : true.
Yeah. Just like that. And watch this shit. Hey! Now Fangs has been fed. Whiskers has been fed. And Buddy has been fed. We have successfully changed state.
How do we toggle it again?
How do we toggle it?
You throw a bang, and then you put this dot state dot isfed.
Yeah. Set it to the opposite of whatever it is right now. And now we can torture that cat all we want. Questions about anything we've done so far?
I guess just like earlier when we ended up moving this functionality onto the app, was that like
Mhm.
preferred? Is that better practice, or was that just like for demonstration?
It depends. If this component is the only place that that state really exists, then keep the state here. On the other hand, let's say that these cats came back from an API or something and they have an isFed attribute on the API, yeah, then I would expect it to be here. It has to do with, I don't know, how big should that state reach? If that state only exists on this component, doesn't make much sense to keep it somewhere else. All right, make sure that your cat component looks like mine before we do this last step. I'm going to put it in the thread if you need to copy it. There it is. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to move the isFed state from this cat component up to the app component. Because yeah, let's say it does come back from an API. So I want you to add an isFed attribute to each of these cats. Like that. Next, we're going to pass isFed into that cat component because we still need it. By the way, this is like one of the first things that I think confuses people in React. I don't have to keep calling it isFed. You can change the name as you're passing it around, and then that just changes it over here to has been fooded or done been fooded. They're like, sometimes there's no reason to change the name, but it's not a rule or anything. All right, so these cats have an isFed property on them. We're passing that property in to the component. Now, first thing that changes on the cat component. We're not keeping track of the state anymore, so we get rid of it. That means this is no longer state. It's being passed in, which makes it props. Cool. Now it's got props. Cool. So one of our hard and fast rules with state. If the state lives here, it needs to change here. You cannot set state of a component you're not in. That means this set state action, whatever it is, that has to happen in this component somewhere. So let's say we made a method. It's called feed cat. Follow along with me. It takes in a cat name. Function's called feed cat. Argument, or the parameter is the cat name. This part gets a little bit weird. So I'm going to set state. What am I setting the state of? Well, I'm setting the state of cats. So, cool. What should cats be equal to? This is the part that's weird. It's going to be this.state.cats.map. We are going to change an array of cats where nobody's been fed into an array of cats where one of them has been fed. That's the transformation that's happening. So you're going to take each individual cat and you're going to see if it's the one that you're supposed to feed. If the cat's name is equal to the one that you passed in, that means that's the cat that we're feeding. So we set cat.isFed to true. In every case, we return the cat. Just take a second to stare at that.
And this is all just plain old JavaScript, which is why you can use the if statement.
Exactly. We're just in the middle of the function that you pass into a map.
And because we're inside a set state, we can do the cat.isFed equals true.
Yeah. We're taking this, well, okay, so think about what this will resolve to. All of this, like the thing that starts at this.state.cats, we're mapping it. So we're going to generate a brand new array. That's what always comes back from map, is a totally new array. And that's what we're going to set the cat state to. We could also write this way. This might be easier to read. It's the exact same thing. Hi, Jesse. I mean, all we did was make a new list of cats and set the cat state to that new list. And you can also inline that like I did before, like that. That's also fair. That's the same thing. Questions about this?
Do we have to alter something on the render to implement that?
Yes. So this is how the cat state is going to change. The thing that needs to change over here is cat needs to be able to call that method. I can't define feed cat on cat because this set state. I can't set somebody else's state. I can call somebody else's method to set state though, if they give it to me as a prop. I'll say that one a couple times. I can't set somebody else's state, but I can call their method to set state if they give it to me as a prop. I can't set somebody else's state. I can call the function that they gave me that sets state if they pass it down to me. So this becomes feed cat is this dot feed cat. Now the cat component has a props.feedCat. And if I call that function with the name of a cat, I would expect that state to change. So if instead of doing that set state in there, this dot props dot feed cat, where's the cat's name come from?
Props.
Props. This dot props dot name. So, did it work? Fed, fed, fed. Look at that again. I made a method called feedCat. It takes in a cat name. It generates a new list of cats. It's really just looking for a matching cat and setting that property to true, but it generates a completely new array. And then I set the state with that. I have to do that because you can only change the state of something in the same place the state is declared. That's there. Really. Cats is there. So that has to be there. Then I gave the cat component that function. Here you go. Call this whenever you need to change this. There's not a single mention of state anywhere in this cat component, but it has that function and it can call it. That's how we change state. That's how we pass functions around. Give me some questions.
Can you kind of go over, I did yesterday and I thought I understood it, but then I realized how much I didn't.
Okay.
As far as when to put stuff, like variables on between render and return and when to outside of it.
Sure. So, like this one, for example, I can put this here. I have to get rid of the const keyword because it's not a function body. And then I could make this dot cats. This will work. The problem with it though, it's not when the cats list updates, like I actually don't, I think that will probably break the app. Might not. Yep, check it out. Won't work anymore. Anybody know why?
I know something about not being dynamic or something.
Yes, it's a big part of it. it won't react. I feel like I'm saying the titular line of a movie or something. Actually has to do with lifecycle methods. Render is a lifecycle method. So when a state change happens, a whole bunch of shit like ticks off under the hood in React. And one of the very last ones is render. You know, it's, okay, so this state change happened. Now, is there anything that I have to render differently? If I do that, yeah, there definitely is. And it's going to regenerate that list, and it's going to re-render this template. On the other hand, if I do that, this stuff doesn't change. It doesn't redeclare the feed cat function. It doesn't redeclare any of this stuff. That only happens one time. So this cats list never changes, even though the state technically did. So if you want that to respond to a state change, it has to be inside that render function. What else you want to know?
So in the feed cat method, I put for cat is fed, I put the bang operator for like opposite of what this dot state
Yeah.
dot, you know, all that stuff. And it didn't go back. Like it didn't toggle. So is there something different you have to do?
Oh, yeah, it's going to be whatever this particular cat is. Since we're iterating through it, it's going to be something like that. That should work. There you go. Otra preguntas.
Thanks.
Cool. Good looking out, gang. Cheers.